Good morning. There are a couple of discrete sermons that we can see in the Gospels. The most famous one, of course, we talked about a little bit last week, Sermon on the Mount. In Luke's Gospel, we find the Sermon on the Plain. And here, today, we find the Mount Olives sermon, or the Olivet discourse, and which is obviously given from atop the Mount of Olives. It's in all three synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and it's a little darker, as you can probably tell. Jesus is up there on the Mount of Olives, which is this ridge on the eastern side of Jerusalem that had a fantastic view of the entire city below. And so they're all up there, they're taking in the sights. And what would have been the most prominent feature in their eyesight? The temple, the Jerusalem temple. Most prominent feature and probably the most important feature that they could see. There had been a temple there on that spot for 800, 900 years. It was sort of David's idea, and then Solomon took it up to build it. It's then called Solomon's Temple. It exists for hundreds of years. It's destroyed around 587, 586 BC by the Babylonians. Not quite 100 years later, they rebuild it. People come back from their exile in Babylon to rebuild the temple. But because they're all coming back from exile and they have to rebuild the entire city and the entire land, it's a humbler temple. It's a starter temple. They just they just get the basics done, which then gives them plenty of time over the next several hundred years to embellish and add on and make it bigger. The last person to really do this is Herod. Yes, the same Herod who we'll be reading about in a few weeks, who will be ordering the murder of all the male children of Bethlehem to try and get at Jesus. He decides he's going to expand the temple dramatically, and he does expand it dramatically. It becomes the largest temple complex in the Roman Empire, if not the world at that moment. Within the courts of the Jerusalem temple, in Herod's version of the temple, around 100,000 people could gather. I mean, huge. This place is huge. In the center of the temple complex is the temple proper. Herod's temple proper was 15 stories tall. Do you know how many cities in America don't have a building that's 15 stories tall? I mean, it's huge. For 99% of the people that would go to Jerusalem and see the temple, it would be the largest human project they ever saw and ever would see, and the tallest human project that they had ever seen or ever would see. And remember that Jesus' disciples, they're not city boys. They're country boys. They're from the rural area around the Sea of Galilee. They would have made it into Jerusalem a couple times a year, but they were used to the quiet, small country life by the sea. There they are, standing on the Mount of Olives, seeing this incredible thing in front of them. It's like when we bring in relatives from the Midwest or something, and we take them to the top of the Empire State Building, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. That would have been the disciples with Jesus on the Mount of Olives, looking out. And the disciples say outright, this is amazing. Look at these buildings. They're incredible. Look at the stones. And without even throwing them a bone, without even saying, yeah, it is kind of impressive, the first thing Jesus says is, yeah, but it's not going to last long. Yeah, there's going to come a time real soon when not one stone will stand on top of another stone. And I have to believe that of all the things that Jesus had said that were perhaps outlandish to their ears, this had to be one of the most outlandish things. I kind of imagine them saying to him, look, we went along with love your neighbor and forgive people and blessed are the poor, but this is a step too far. There is no way this huge, incredible, tall, large structure is ever going anywhere. This thing is going to be there forever, right? And then if the disciples had gathered back on the Mount of Olives about 40 years to the day, and they looked out at the same view, the temple would be gone. In fact, the order that came down from Rome when the Roman army destroyed it was that not one stone shall stand atop another stone. They came back a couple years later and they ground the earth down, taking off a dozen feet or more of the soil on the top of the Temple Mount so that they wouldn't have the soil that the temple stood on and they wouldn't exactly know where it was. To this day, archaeologists disagree on exactly where the temple is because we can't find its foundations because they're gone. What Jesus and the disciples are wrestling with there on the mountaintop is what lasts, what endures, what makes it. And the related question there is, what's actually important? The related questions. What's important? And what lasts. Notice, for as many times as Jesus in his ministry goes to the temple, for as many times in his life that Jesus went to the temple in Jerusalem, when Jesus does his teaching ministry, he never founds a church building. You can't go to any place in Jerusalem or Judea and be like, well, here's the church that Jesus built, and there's the cornerstone that he laid. Isn't it lovely? He never tells his disciples to go off and build great edifices at all. Jesus is perfectly happy preaching wherever he happened to be, whether it was on a mountaintop or whether it was on a large field or it was on the beach, whatever it was, he just did it there. The gospel authors seem to go out of their way to not tell us exactly where the important events of Jesus' life even were. I mean, we know that he's born in Bethlehem, but they don't give us a street address. They don't say it was across from the tavern and caddy corner from the market. No, just born in Bethlehem. But where? Where was the Sermon on the Mount, this most important, famous sermon that Jesus gives? There were a lot of mountains in the ancient Near East. Which mountain was it? They don't tell us. Where exactly was his Last Supper? Well, we know it was somewhere in the old city of Jerusalem, but where? Where's the address? We don't have it. Where exactly was Jesus' tomb, where he was buried and resurrected? I mean, surely the most holy spot on planet Earth. Where exactly is it? The gospel authors don't tell us. Where's the mountain that Jesus gathers with his disciples and ascends into heaven from? Surely the last place that Jesus of Nazareth's feet touched planet Earth should be an important spot. What mountain? We don't know. It's like the gospel authors followed on with Jesus' insistence that this is not going to be a religion that's just about tourist visits and visiting this site and this site and this site. Jesus seems to not care about places and buildings and stuff, even to the point of the grandest temple on planet Earth that was dedicated to the worship of his heavenly Father. Even that, he's like, it's not going to last. So if those things don't matter, if places and stuff and buildings don't matter to Jesus, what matters? And this is where I'm hoping you're going to shout out some things. I heard love, faith. Anything else? What? Sorry. Family. Gratitude. What'd you say? Charity. The works of the Spirit. There's this interaction that Jesus has with the Pharisees in Matthew's gospel, where he talks about how they tithe mint, dill, and cumin. Like they go into they're such tithers. We are at the end of stewardship season. They are such tithers that they go into their herb gardens and they take out their dill crop for the year and they make sure they get 10%, and that 10% goes to the temple. And Jesus is not impressed at all. He's like, you tithe mint, dill, and cumin, but you miss the weightier matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faith. Like there's stuff that doesn't matter, but there's stuff that does matter. And love and gratitude and compassion and mercy and grace and justice and forgiveness. Notice those things don't have addresses. You can't go pick those things up in bulk at Costco. And those are the things that also don't crumble. Those are things that the Roman army couldn't knock down. Those are the things that last. There's the old corporate parable that you've all probably sat through in a corporate team building session. It's the parable of the jar. You know, the professor has the empty jar and he puts the rocks in the jar, and they're kind of like 2-3 inch rocks, and he fills it up and he asks the students, is it full? And the students go, yeah, it's full. And then he brings out the bag of gravel and he puts the gravel in, and it fills in all the holes between the rocks, and he goes, is it full now? And the students go, absolutely. And then he takes out the bag of sand and he fills in, and it goes in through all the cracks of the gravel until it's finally full. And part of the main point of that corporate parable is that you can't do it in reverse. You can't fill the jar up with sand and then expect to get any of the larger rocks in. Our lives can get busy. Our lives are busy. We get whipped up. We get things happen. The holidays are upon us. Right? We're soon to hear Christmas carols on the radio. Things get busy, and it is very easy to forget the things that matter. Any of you use a to-do list? Any of you have spouses who give you a to-do list? Am I the only one? Okay, thank you, Jeff. Every day off, I go to the kitchen, and on our island is my to-do list to do for the day. But I also use my own to-do list. But, and my to-do list is full, as I'm sure your to-do list is full. But what would it look like if we also put on our to-do list, not just what to pick up at the store and what report to get done and what email to send, but we put in, do an act of justice, do an act of love, do an act of mercy, do an act of grace, forgive someone. So that the things that we fill up our life with are things that matter and endure. Amen.